Margaret Hayes stood in the polished terminal of Chicago O'Hare International Airport, her silver hair pinned elegantly at the nape of her neck. At 72, she carried herself with the quiet dignity of someone who had learned long ago that the world would not always meet her halfway. Her hands moved gracefully through the air as she tried to ask a passing traveler where Gate B-17 was located. The businessman barely glanced her way before hurrying past. She tried again with a woman pulling a suitcase. The same result. A quick, uncomfortable smile, and an even quicker retreat. Margaret sighed and adjusted the strap of her cream-colored handbag. She had become invisible again, not because of her age, though that happened too, but because the moment people realized she was deaf, they froze. Panic flickered across their faces. They would mumble apologies she couldn't hear and disappear into the crowd. Her son Daniel was somewhere in this airport. Daniel Hayes, the newly appointed CEO of a major pharmaceutical company. She was so proud of him. He had texted her to meet him at his gate, so they could fly together to his father's memorial service in Boston. It had been a year since Robert passed, and this trip felt heavier than she had expected. But now she was lost in a sea of rushing travelers, and her phone battery had died. Margaret walked slowly toward what she hoped was the right direction, her eyes scanning the departure boards overhead. The letters and numbers blurred together. She had forgotten her reading glasses in the car. A young woman in a red dress nearly collided with her while staring at her phone. The woman glanced up with irritation, then walked around Margaret without a word. Margaret felt the familiar ache of loneliness settle in her chest. The world had become so fast, so distracted, so afraid of anything that required a moment of patience. She found a bench near a coffee shop and sat down. She would wait. Maybe Daniel would realize she wasn't at the gate and come looking for her. Or maybe anyone, would offer a moment of kindness. Across the terminal, Ryan Mitchell stood with his 7-year-old daughter, Emma. They had just said goodbye to Emma's mother at security. The divorce had been finalized 6 months ago, and these airport exchanges had become their new normal. Emma clutched a stuffed rabbit under one arm and held Ryan's hand with the other. Ryan was 45, with kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. He worked as a teacher at a school for deaf and hard-of-hearing children. It was a job that had found him by accident 12 years ago when he was hired as a substitute, but it had become his calling. Emma tugged his hand and pointed toward the coffee shop. "Daddy, can I get hot chocolate?" "Sure, sweetheart," Ryan said. They walked toward the cafe, and that was when he noticed the older woman sitting alone on the bench. She looked worried. Her hands were folded tightly in her lap, and her eyes kept darting around the crowded terminal. Ryan recognized that expression. He had seen it before on the faces of his students' parents when they found themselves in situations where communication felt impossible. As they passed, he saw her hands move. Just a small gesture, a question formed in sign language and directed at no one in particular. Ryan stopped walking. "Emma, hold on a second," he said gently. He approached the woman and positioned himself where she could clearly see him. Then he signed. "Hello. Do you need help?" Margaret's face transformed. Her eyes widened with surprise, then filled with relief. She signed back quickly. "Yes. Thank you. I am looking for Gate B-17. My son is waiting for me." Ryan smiled and signed. "That gate is in the next terminal. I can walk you there if you would like." Margaret's hands moved with gratitude. "You are very kind." "Yes, please." Emma watched with curiosity as her father and the woman communicated. She had seen her daddy sign before, but never with a stranger in an airport. "Emma, this is Margaret." Ryan signed and spoke simultaneously. "We are going to help her find her gate." Emma smiled shyly and gave a small wave. Margaret's face softened even more. She signed Emma. "You have a beautiful name." Emma looked at her father for translation. Ryan spoke. "She says you have a beautiful name." Emma beamed. The three of them began walking together through the airport. Ryan carried Emma's small backpack and kept pace with Margaret's slower stride. Other travelers rushed past them, but Ryan did not hurry. He knew that kindness could not be rushed. As they walked, Margaret signed her story. Her husband had passed away a year ago. She was traveling to Boston with her son for a memorial gathering. She had raised 3 children, all of whom had learned sign language. Her son Daniel had worked so hard his whole life, and now he was the CEO of an important company. She was proud, but she worried that he worked too much and forgot to rest. Ryan listened with his eyes, the way he had learned to do years ago. He nodded and responded, and Emma watched the conversation unfold like a dance. When they reached Terminal B, Ryan checked the departure boards and pointed toward the correct corridor. But Margaret touched his arm gently and signed, "Please, come with me to the gate. I want to introduce you to my son." Ryan hesitated. He did not want to intrude, but something in Margaret's expression made him agree. They walked together down the long corridor, past duty-free shops and crowded seating areas, until they reached gate B-17. Standing near the counter was a man in his early 40s, wearing a pressed navy blue shirt and black slacks. He had the polished appearance of someone important, and he was on his phone, speaking urgently to someone about quarterly projections and board meetings. Margaret's face lit up when she saw him. She waved, and the man looked up. His expression shifted from stress to relief. "Mom," Daniel said, ending his call and walking quickly toward her. He wrapped her in a hug, then pulled back and signed. "Where were you?" "I was getting worried. I called you 3 times. Margaret signed back, "My phone died. I got lost. This man helped me." Daniel turned to look at Ryan for the first time. His gaze swept over Ryan's casual jeans and worn jacket, then landed on Emma, who was still clutching her stuffed rabbit. "Thank you," Daniel said stiffly, extending his hand for a brief shake. "I appreciate you helping my mother." Ryan shook his hand and smiled. "It was no trouble at all. She is a lovely person." Margaret signed something to Daniel, but he was already glancing back at his phone. An email notification had appeared on the screen. "Mom, I need to make one more call before we board." Daniel signed quickly. "Just wait here, okay?" Margaret's expression dimmed slightly, but she nodded. Daniel walked a few steps away and pressed the phone back to his ear. Ryan felt Emma tug his hand. She whispered, "Daddy, he seems busy." Ryan nodded. He looked at Margaret, who was watching her son with a mixture of pride and sadness. Ryan signed to her, "Your son must have a lot of responsibilities." Margaret signed back, "Yes, too many. He forgets to see what is right in front of him sometimes." Ryan understood. He had seen it before. People who became so consumed with their work, their success, their obligations, that they forgot the simple importance of presence. Margaret reached into her purse and pulled out a small notebook and pen. She wrote something down, then tore out the page and handed it to Ryan. It read, "Thank you for your kindness. The world needs more people like you. Blessings to you and your beautiful daughter." Ryan felt a lump form in his throat. He took the note and folded it carefully. Margaret signed, "You did not have to stop, but you did. That means everything." Emma stepped forward and held out her stuffed rabbit toward Margaret. "You can hold him for good luck on your plane," she said softly. Margaret looked down at the child, and tears filled her eyes. She knelt slowly and accepted the rabbit, holding it gently. Then she handed it back and touched Emma's cheek with the tenderness of a grandmother. Daniel returned, slipping his phone into his pocket. He signed to his mother, "They are boarding now. We should get in line." Margaret nodded. She turned back to Ryan and Emma and waved goodbye. Ryan signed, "Safe travels." As they walked toward the gate, Daniel glanced back once at Ryan. Something in his expression had shifted. Perhaps it was the way his mother had looked at the stranger. Or perhaps it was the realization that in his rush through life, he had nearly let her get lost. Ryan and Emma stood together and watched them board. Emma leaned against her father's side. "That was nice, Daddy," she said. "Yes, it was," Ryan replied. They turned and began walking back through the terminal. The crowd still rushed past. The announcement still echoed overhead. But something felt different now. Lighter. Behind them, on the plane, Margaret sat by the window. Daniel sat beside her and finally put his phone away. He signed to her, "I am sorry I was distracted. Thank you for being patient with me." Margaret signed back, "That man today reminded me of your father. He knew how to see people." Daniel thought about that. He thought about the stranger who had taken time out of his own day to help someone who needed it. He thought about how easy it would have been to walk past her, like so many others had. He reached over and took his mother's hand. Outside the window, the plane began to taxi toward the runway. And inside, a son remembered what mattered most. Kindness costs nothing but means everything. If this story touched your heart, please share, and subscribe for more stories that celebrate the quiet moments of human connection. Leave a comment below and tell us about a time when a stranger showed you unexpected kindness.